To get the RV, you're going to come to 1160 and then turn into this storage yard. The Gulfstream is stored in the back corner here. You can pull it out to load it up, and you can leave a car there. Just make sure that you leave the car in the spot that the Gulfstream was in, so that you're not blocking the boat or any of the trailers that somebody else might need to access. We'll leave a set of keys in the back that you can find just above the tow hitch here. Be careful pulling out. You're going to want to check all of your camera feeds. Now working our way around the RV. Got the slide out here. The control for that is just above the driver's seat on the roof there. You can slide it out. Make sure that you slide it back in before driving away. And also make sure that the hatches are put away before you slide it out. Hatches are these down here, and they store a number of things. If they're open and locked in the open position, when you pop the slide out, you could damage them. So be careful of that. The front hatch has the batteries in it that control all the functions of the house. Not the driving battery, but the house battery. And you shouldn't need to do anything in this compartment, but if there is an overload, so maybe too many appliances are run at the same time, and the power seems to shut off for a second, then come in here and make sure that each of these breakers is connected. If the little yellow lever is down, then that battery is disconnected from the bank, and you'll want to pop that lever up to make sure that it's connected. Moving back, we have this compartment, which has some leveling blocks and jacks that you can use to try and level the trailer a little bit, along with water pipe and extension cord. The inverter here, don't put anything on this. So if you're going to bring some firewood with you or something, you can store things in the compartments, but don't store anything on top of the inverter because it can get very hot and that'll create a fire hazard. Also in here is the control for the airbag system. You can use the airbag system to level the RV a little bit. It's got about 2 inches of total tilt left and right that you can get out of it, but also you want it for when you're driving. It does help the suspension substantially. When you're driving, you want each side to be at 80 psi, and you can see this one's a little bit below that. The way that you control it is you turn the switch on for the air compressor, and then you can add pressure when the air compressor is running. Do not leave the air compressor running unless you're simultaneously allowing the air pressure to go into the airbags. It doesn't have an off switch, and it'll damage the air compressor if it runs for more than about 10 seconds without the air going into one of the bladders. So you just do it like this, you turn it on, put the air into the bladder, and then turn it off. You can also let air out of the bladder just by putting the switch down. And you basically want them each at 80. Or if you're parked, you can let all of the air out on one side and you can add more on the other side to level it up to 100 psi. And here we have the power cable. There's an adapter that will let you run on 110 volts 15 amps. And then the larger cord has a 30 amp receptacle. If you're running on 110 amps, then you'll want to set the inverter to limit it to say 10 amps. And if you remove this adapter and you're using the 30 amp receptacle, then set it at say 25 amps, and that'll restrict how much power is going in. That way you don't blow a breaker on whatever power source you're drawing from. Often the pedestals at campgrounds can easily be blown if you draw too much power for too long. If you have full hookups, you can connect your pressurized water line to this spigot, and then the sewage is in this compartment back here. Gas goes in here, and there will be a hose for the sewage down here. The red hose is one that you can use for cleaning up when you're dumping the tanks, or for rinsing the sewer line. Don't use that for fresh water. There's a blue hose that's in the forward locker, and that's what you would use for connecting fresh water. So red, dead, don't ever connect that to the fresh water. Blue is good for drinking potable water. Here's the waste gates and the black and gray tank. To drain the tanks, you're going to connect the sewer line. It slides up and then twists, and you want to make sure that they're called bayonet fittings. You see, they rotate until that little pin engages. Make sure it rotates all the way. So that it doesn't accidentally pop out when you open the gate. That can happen, and it's a stinky mess. So rotate it all the way, and then this end of the hose would go over and connect into the sewer access point. Once it's connected, then you can pull the wastegate handles. You would first pull the black, let that fully drain, and then pull the gray and let that rinse the black water out. And then you close both those again and unscrew the bayonet fitting, and then rinse it out with the red hose before putting it back and be on your way. You are responsible for draining the waste tank before you bring it back. Most gas stations and campgrounds have dump locations. The reason that we charge if we have to dump it ourselves is because there's no dump location at the storage yard, so we have to drive it to another place, and it ends up taking a lot of time. On the passenger side, moving from front to back, the first locker has the generator in it. You shouldn't need to access the generator from outside the RV unless it's quite cold and it hasn't run in a while, in which case you might need to pull the choke in order to start the generator. Whether starting from the outside or starting from inside the cabin, you do need to have it turned on inside. The switch to turn the generator on is above the microwave, and when you push it up to turn it on, you'll hear the fuel pump turn on to run the generator. You could start it with this button here, or if it's cold and you are accessing the generator from outside using the choke, you'll pull the choke out, and then you push this red switch up to start it. Once it starts, push the choke in and you're running. To stop the generator, you turn it off inside the cabin at this switch. You want to make sure that you don't run the generator after 9 o'clock if you're in a campground, anywhere where other people are camping. It's just courtesy to get it turned off at no later than 9 o'clock. Also on this side, we have the fresh water inlet. There's a key on the keychain to unlock this, and you can fill the tank from there. A storage locker behind the generator has some tools, a mat that you might want when you're camping. You can feel free to lay that out. And then also if you need to store some firewood or something like that, you can put that in this locker. There's not a lot of storage space on the outside of this RV. The roof line is very low for this size of RV, which is nice. It means you can get in more places, but the cost of that is that there's not a lot of storage locker space underneath the floor. The rearmost locker has propane in it. Propane should be full, or at least above half tank. Looks like we're halfway between half and 3/4 right now. If you do need to fill it on your trip, this is where you'd fill it from. Now, stepping into the RV, the automatic steps will come out. There are a lot of controls immediately on your left down at the floor line, and they control a number of things. They control the step. You want to make sure that when you leave, whenever you take off, you're going to walk all the way around the RV and make sure that you haven't left any leveling jacks or anything underneath or any cables connected to it. But also, you want to turn on the electric step. If you've turned it off when you're camping or at a location, then when you close the door, the steps won't stow automatically, so they're not coming in and going out, which is nice. But you got to remember to turn it back on when you leave, so that when you close the door, the steps will stow away and they don't get knocked off as you're driving out. That has happened, and these steps are pretty expensive to replace. When you do pull out and drive away, you have the steps on, close the door, and then make sure you lock the hard bolt. That'll just be extra sure that the door doesn't swing open. If you don't lock the door, it's possible, if you hit a big bump, that the door can actually unlatch, and then it'll pop itself open when you come to a stop, and the steps will swing out while you're on the street. You don't want that, so make sure to lock that door when you drive out. Other controls down here are for lights over here and for the water heater. This controller lets you select whether you want electric or gas. For the water heater to work, something has to be turned on, and you can't have both of them on simultaneously. So if I'm camping, I want to run on gas because I don't have unlimited free electricity. The electric won't work unless the vehicle's plugged into an electric hookup anyway. So I would have the gas turned on, and then up above the stove, you also need to have the water heater turned on. Now that'll engage. So this is the overall water heater power. And then the heating source selector is down here. In terms of these lights, everything is pretty self-explanatory, except the trunk light might not be obvious. That actually, we switch that around. That controls the light bar that is just below the awning. And that is, it's dimmable and color controllable, which can be very pleasant when you're camping, that you don't have just a big floodlight. You can dial the lighting to what you want it to be to create a nice atmosphere. The refrigerator control and thermostat are next. For heat, you're going to switch the selector over to heat, and then that'll turn on the furnace, which is powered by propane, but obviously uses electricity for the fan. For cool, you switch it over to cool, and you have to either have the generator running or be connected to an electrical hookup for the air conditioner to run. And that source has to have been connected for at least 5 minutes for the AC to turn on. Sometimes you plug in and you turn on cool, it's a hot day, and it doesn't turn on right away, and it seems like something is messed up, but it's just that it needs to be on and connected for at least 5 minutes before it turns on. That way it doesn't overload the generator. The power switch to turn the refrigerator on is right here, and the air conditioner fan speed is here. So if you want high speed or low speed, you can select that here. The refrigerator is completely electric. It runs off of the lithium batteries, and it's quite efficient. It cools things down very quickly. It's much more powerful than an absorption refrigerator, which is typical in RVs, but it does use the electricity. Over the course of the night, if the average temperature is about, say, 70 degrees, then throughout the night, it'll consume roughly 15% of the battery bank capacity. So keep that in mind when you go to bed. If the batteries are very low, then you don't want the refrigerator on. If you have ample power, more than 25%, then you should be fine getting through the night with the refrigerator on. Now we come over to the cooktop and microwave area. There's a number of controls here that you want to be aware of. The test button will theoretically tell you what the water tank levels are: gray, black, fresh, and propane. They're not incredibly accurate. In particular, the black tank can be wrong. If a little bit of particulate is stuck to the side of the tank, it could say full even if the tank is empty. To get water pressure from your water tank, you need the water pump on, and this switch does that. If the water tank gets empty, the pump will just run and run and run, and it'll never turn off. If the pump runs continually without turning off, like it just did, turn the switch off. We don't want the pump running for hours. I mean, you don't want the noise, but we don't want the pump running for hours without water circulating through it. Water heater power we discussed, and then this is just the hood light and fan for when you're cooking. When you are cooking, make sure that the fan is on, because this is a very small space and you create a lot of heat here, and you want to get that air circulated out of there. Generator control we discussed previously, but to start the generator from inside, you'll just turn the switch on, and that will turn the fuel pump on, and then press and hold this button. That'll start the generator up. To turn it off, just flip the switch back down. Now the power control center is to the left of the stove, and you basically have one display that tells you about your AC power, 120 volts, and you have one display that tells you about the DC power. By default, the thing you most want to pay attention to is the charge capacity of the battery bank. By default, you want to be looking at the charge state of the batteries. So the battery bank is currently at 88.3%. You're going to charge the batteries from solar, if the generator is on, if you're plugged into a power source, or if you're driving. And they hold a lot of capacity, but if you get down into the, say, 25 or 30% before going to bed, then you'll want to make sure that the refrigerator is turned off. And you might want to think about turning on the generator and letting it run for a half hour to charge the bank back up. But this is, either way, the information you're most interested in here is the battery bank capacity. It is a very large bank for this size of trailer, 300 amp hours of lithium, and you can see its charge state here. Up above is the AC power, and that basically tells you how much power is currently being used. Right now, 1.6 watts is a small parasitic load on the inverter, but if you were to, say, run the microwave, then that power would go up. Speaking of the microwave, there's one interesting idiosyncrasy about this microwave, and that is that it has a weight safety sensor inside that prevents it from operating if something is not in the microwave. At least that's how it's supposed to work. It doesn't always work that way. So if, in this case, it's not working and the microwave just turned on. As you can see, now we have 1400 watts. If you try to run the microwave and it does not work, instead you get a little message up here that just says food. What that means is the load safety sensor on this tray is, it believes that there's no food in there. So just change the weight on that plate, either by taking food out or putting food in, and then start it again, and that'll reset it, and then it'll work. It'll work just fine. Finally, over here we have the party lights. My kids absolutely love this, but basically behind the remote there is a button that turns the lights on, and they're behind the cabinets and up and all around. And these can be controlled by this remote, but this remote also controls the foot lighting and the indirect mood lighting that's outside underneath the awning. So you can control each of those separately by switching through these buttons. That turns the different banks on. But basically the upper lights are bank 1, the lower lights are bank 2, or maybe they're bank 3? Oh, they're bank 3, and then the outside light is bank 2. And then you can change the color for each bank, switching back and forth to them with this. So feel free to play with this or let your kids play with it. And anyway, that's where that is and how all those different fun ambient lights can be controlled. There's also a lighter here for starting the stove. And the propane needs to be on, obviously, for the stove to work, but you'll just turn it over to light and then use the lighter to ignite it. You want the propane turned off when you're driving, just to be safe. Likely nothing would happen if it's on, but that's the standard procedure, is that it's off when you're driving and it's on when you're camped. Currently it's off. To turn it on, you just rotate the knob. That turns it on, and then rotate it again to turn it off. We keep it off when it's in storage, just for safety. Talking about propane, there is a propane leak detector here. It also detects carbon monoxide. So if this goes off in the night, it could be because it's having a fault, or it could be because of carbon monoxide or propane. So please do take that seriously should that alarm go off during the night. You'll see throughout the RV these blue illuminated buttons, and those are light controls. Most of them are self-explanatory. You see a blue button, you push it and the lights turn on. Although, over the dinette is a little bit different. It has a dimmer up here. So in addition to the button needing to be on, the dimmer will need to be set to control the amount of light that you want coming from the chandelier. The radiant floor heat thermostat is down here. You do have to be plugged into a power source for this to work, but just rotate it to the temperature that you want, and the radiant floor heating will turn on and pleasantly warm the coach. It's a really nice feature, but it's easy to drain the batteries dead overnight if you're not plugged in. So it only works if you are plugged in to an electrical hookup. Below the sink, we got a couple more things. So there's coffee supplies and cleaning supplies down there. Also, some more power control stuff. There's circuit breakers for the solar panels, a main breaker to disconnect the circuits. That's really for storing and winterizing. You don't have to worry about that. But what you might need to look at is the inverter control. So the inverter takes 12 volt power from the batteries and turns it into 120 volt AC power that can be used to run the microwave, power receptacles, also the receptacles with the USB chargers in them. All of that stuff is powered through the inverter. And so the inverter is generally always on. If you want to save battery power, you can turn it off. But it doesn't use a lot, so typically we just leave it on. And if the coach is plugged into power, then the power goes to the inverter and it supplements what is being taken from the batteries. If there's excess power, then it'll put power into the batteries and charge them up. This little knob here limits how much power the inverter is willing to take from the electrical hookup. So if you plug in the coach to a receptacle at somebody's house or a ranch or at a campsite, then this will limit how many amps the coach is willing to take from that receptacle. If you have it set up at 30 amps and you plug into a 10 amp receptacle, your typical, that would be a 10 or 15 amp receptacle, then the coach will draw more power than the receptacle can supply, and it should trip the circuit breaker at the ranch or campsite pedestal. But if you turn the current that it's willing to take down, then it won't take too much power. So that is a very useful feature on this RV that allows you to plug into a smaller receptacle, but still run your air conditioner without worrying about blowing the circuit breaker at the receptacle that you're plugged into. Fuses and other circuit breakers are behind the coffee supplies. You shouldn't need any of those, but that's where they're located. And then this right here, you shouldn't ever have to switch this, the emergency start. If you flip it up, it connects the driving battery with the house batteries. They should not be left connected. Where that is useful is if, for some reason, the battery of the vehicle is drained and the car can't start, or the engine can't start, by flipping up to this, it's now connected to the house bank, and you can use the house batteries to actually start the coach. That should always be in the off position, but in an emergency, rather than jump starting the RV, you can push that and you'll actually just jump start from the house batteries. Please do not leave that connected. It could damage all of the batteries. And then a little vacuum is kept up there, cleaning supplies. Up front, there's not a whole lot to cover. The stereo does have CarPlay and Android Auto. To connect to that via a cable, you can use the top USB. The bottom one does power but doesn't connect data. The top one connects data. And then a unique function in this RV is that you can draw power from the radio, or for the radio from the house bank, by switching the stereo source selector, and that will bring power to the stereo from the house bank. So if you want to be listening to music without leaving the ignition on, you can switch over to that to listen to music, run your Bluetooth, things like that, while the vehicle is turned off, so that you don't drain the battery down. One other thing to mention up here, the RV has a 50-gallon tank, and when you rent the RV, it will be full. That doesn't mean that the needle is on the F. That means that the tank will not accept any more gas. So when you bring it back, please fill it all the way full. The difference between the needle being on the F and it actually being full is like 10 gallons, which today is relatively expensive. So yeah, please just return it completely full, as the person who rented it before you did as well. There are 3 sleeping options in the Gulfstream. There's a couch that folds out, there's the dinette that lays down, and then there's the loft bed up above. To get into and out of the loft bed, you just climb on the back of the dinette rest. That'll allow you to get over and into the loft bed. Kids really love it up there. You can close the curtains, and if you push and hold the power button on these lights, you get a soft blue light, which is really fun for the kids as well. Or you can just push on and have regular light. If you have younger kids sleeping up there, then falling is a concern. And what we like to do is actually we've got a bunch of cutting boards under the sink, and we put the cutting boards between the frame and the cushion, and that creates a bit of a barricade. So that's what we do for our own children to help give us some peace of mind while we're sleeping, and you're welcome to do that as well. It's actually probably the most comfortable bed in the RV. It's a nice memory foam up there, but it is a bit of a climb to get up there, which is why it's predominantly used by kids. But yeah, it is probably the most comfortable bed. To pull the couch into a sleeping configuration, you're going to pull out the footrest, and the legs on the footrest have a button that can be pushed to deploy them. It doesn't work to push this button. You can't get it in far enough to pivot the leg. So you push this button down here, and that allows it to swivel. You can't deploy the legs when the footrest is in this position. You have to deploy them when it's lifted up in this position. To lay the couch flat. It's not super intuitive. You lift it up and it feels like you get to the top of the travel of the couch. But what you need to do is keep pushing it farther. And as you do, it'll swing the base out. Once you get to the point that the base swings out, then you can reach down and grab the base and pull it forward a little bit more. Then when you open it up and lay it down, it'll lay down flat. And then you can lift up the footrest and deploy the legs of the footrest. To put it away, similarly, you lift up the base. Oh, and the passenger seat needs to be at least somewhat forward. It's very easy to lean the passenger seat back enough that you can't actuate the couch. So if you're trying to lay the couch into a bed or vice versa, be mindful of that. To put it back into the couch, again, you lift it up and you keep going. It feels like you get to the top, but it's not the top. You got to keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. And then while you're pushing up, you can kind of, with your knee, push the bottom in, and then it'll come back down. And you can slide the footrest back into place. Also, you can see the water tank back there. So it's pretty easy to see what level the water is at just looking through there. The water indicator on the testing button, it does work, but nothing is as accurate as just looking to see how much water is in the tank with your eyes. The dinette also can turn into a bed, and you'll do it by putting away the leg, then lifting the table up, pulling it out, and then setting it down, and it sits on these ledges here. So you'll pull the cushions out of the way before doing that, and then you'll drop them down again after you've dropped the table down. I use my knee to support the table when I put the leg away, and that's because you don't want the table supporting all of its weight cantilevered on the bracket on the wall. It could break the bracket. But to put the leg away, you just push the little button this way on top and pivot it up. Then lifting the table up, it'll kind of pop out of the bracket, and then you can pull it forward. It weighs about 15 pounds, so keep that in mind. And then you can set it on the two sides I mentioned before. Pull the cushions out, and then lay the other cushions down. And the bed's deployed. To put it away, we're going to repeat the process. You want to take extra caution when putting the table back in the bracket. You'll lift it up, and I put my leg up on the raised portion of the slide out, and that can support it once it's in the bracket. But you're going to set it, there's a little shelf there, and so it's set on that shelf. I want to lift it high enough, which is about to my chest, that it can go in the bracket, and then give it a little bit of upward pressure. You can see how it lifts up into the bracket, and then when it's up, I can lower it back down, and now it's in the bracket. I have to jiggle it a little bit to get it in there. And then if it's in, I can't pull it out. It is a little bit tricky, and it's possible to jam it, so take caution when doing this, and if it doesn't seem like it's working, then back up and try it again. But a little bit of upward pressure when you're on the back, lifting the back up while you lower the front down, will get it in there. And then once you're in on the bracket, you can drop the leg down and you're good to go. In the kitchen, the trash can is in the countertop, which is a really handy feature, and there's should be extra liners in there. The utensils, various kitchen elements. We'll have some rags and trash can liners. We worked hard to maximize the storage space in the RV. It does fill up quickly. These are some of the better places to put the food you might want to bring with you. These plates and bowls and cups are on top. There's a lot of storage up here. We've found that what works best is to take a few extra minutes before you leave and really pack everything that you're taking with you into the RV. Don't leave everything in duffel bags or suitcases or Trader Joe's bags, but really put it, all of the food should be put away before you go, or you end up tripping over bags everywhere. We did put a lot of hooks in a lot of places so that you can hang up your bags and various things, but the space does fill relatively quickly. We've got numerous cooking utensils, extra space for food, pots and pans, and more coffee making supplies. We tend to put our clothes in soft bags and either store them underneath the foot lockers or put them up above in the overhead storage locations. If you do have suitcases and you don't unpack from them, you can also throw them up top. And if you don't have a bunch of kids that are going to be fighting with each other over sleeping up in the fort, then you can have your bags up there. But you can also, when you get where you're going, you can take bags from up there and you can put them in the driver and passenger seat. Or we'll do that with children's car seats as well. We'll have them buckled in. There are seat belts in all of the couch and sitting locations, but then when we get where we're going, we'll put them up there and then close the curtain, which also helps keep heat or cool isolated in the front area, and then that makes a lot of space. But yeah, the general advice, try to take an extra few minutes at the beginning of the trip and pack all of your things where they go and not live out of the suitcase, because you end up tripping over it more than you expect. Oh, another trick with this couch, at the end, when you put your bedding away, if you want to, you can actually roll it up. We use sleeping bag, or if you want, you can bring sheets and blankets, or you can hire us. We'll provide sheets and blankets and beddings, but you can roll it up into a big roll and put it behind the footrest and then slide the footrest back. And that's a quick way to tear down the bed and get to the open living configuration. The bathroom has a few things worth mentioning. There's 20 gallons of gray and 20 gallons of black water storage. It sounds like a lot, but it goes very quickly. The toilet uses a little more than 1/4 of a gallon per flush. And so that should be 80 flushes. Realistically, it works out to somewhere between 50 and 70, depending on what you're putting in it. With kids going multiple times a day, that actually ends up filling up really fast. So be mindful of that. The sinks and the shower all pour into the gray tank. So if you don't have sewage hookups, be really cautious of of using the shower, because it uses about 1 gallon or 1.5 gallons per minute. And so you'll run through your fresh water and your gray water storage very, very quickly. So just be cautious of that. If you're staying at a place where you're able to use showers, where there are shower facilities, then actually the shower becomes a great location for storing things. And we hang stuff from hooks, and we will pile luggage in the shower basin. The toilet, to flush it, you can push just a little bit, and then water will enter the toilet bowl. And then if you push all the way, it drains down into the tank. If it's hot, especially, make sure that when you push the pedal down, you do it quickly, because there's no water lock separating the air in the black water tank from the downspout of the toilet. And that means whenever that valve is open, there's a direct air connection to the toilet tank. And so it only takes a few seconds for a lot of noxious odor to fill the bathroom, especially if it's hot. So if you're camping during the summer, maybe push the pedal down a little bit to put water in, but then when you're actually going to dump the contents of the toilet, make sure you do it quickly and let it back up, let it close quickly, so that it doesn't fill the bathroom with too much malodorous gas. The sink, it's a sink. Try not to use too much water too quickly, because you can drain. And then that's about it for the bathroom. There are vents around the RV, and rotate the crank to get it to go up. Every once in a while, they'll get kind of stuck on the side. You might have to kind of let it down and then go back up again. And then there's air in and air out. There's also light, which you can use. Make sure that the vents are closed before you drive. It's possible to hit things, but they're also whipping around, and the wind, if you're driving on the freeway, can really buffet those vent covers. If it ever seems like the door doesn't want to open, just push on it and it will open. And that's about it for our renovated Gulfstream. We hope you have a great time. Be careful when you're driving it. It drives very easily, but it is a large vehicle. Make sure if you're backing up especially that you are cautious, and have somebody get out and look to see if the RV is going to clear on all 4 corners. But just be cautious and have a wonderful time. We are glad that you chose to rent our RV. We built it with love, and we hope that you have a wonderful time in it.